"Let's make it interesting," Sloane said, her voice cutting through the rooftop wind. "If you can fly this helicopter, I'll marry you." Laughter burst from the small group of executives gathered near the helipad. Kendrick, her polished assistant, grinned like a showman who'd set up the perfect punchline. The janitor, gray uniform name tag half faded, stood a few steps away, holding a mop as if it were a shield. "Come on, Owen," Kendrick goaded, his tone syrupy. "Here's your big chance. Impress the boss." The man didn't answer. He just wiped his hands on a rag, slow and methodical, eyes lowered. Sloane crossed her arms, expecting a stammer or an excuse. Anything but what happened next. He walked past her. At first no one reacted. Then he reached the helicopter and opened the pilot's door like he'd done it 1,000 times. The laughter stalled. Sloane's smirk wavered. The man climbed in, flicked a series of switches, and the engine began to whine. A familiar sound she'd only ever heard from her certified pilot. "Wait, what is he doing?" Kendrick muttered, half laughing, half nervous. The turbine spun higher. Wind whipped Sloane's hair into her face. The rotor blurred into motion. The janitor's movements were exact, economical, each gesture confident, precise. "Stop. You can't," Sloane started, but the words drowned in the rising roar. The helicopter lifted, smooth and steady, no wobble, no hesitation. It hovered 20 feet up, the city skyline shimmering behind it. Then, as if in salute, the aircraft dipped its nose in a graceful bow before landing again, so gently that the skids barely kissed the concrete. The noise faded into stunned silence. The janitor stepped out, calm as ever, closed the door, and picked up his mop. He didn't look at her, didn't say a word, just resumed cleaning the scuff marks by the pad's edge. Sloane's mouth was dry. Her laughter was gone. The wind was the only sound between them. "Who are you?" she whispered, but he was already walking away. The bet, meant to humiliate, had turned into something else entirely, an unanswered question that would follow her long after the echo of those blades disappeared. Sloane Davenport's mornings began before sunrise, not because she needed to, but because stillness made her uneasy. The world felt controllable in those early hours, the quiet before her company roared awake. She liked the precision of her schedule, the order of her success. Coffee at 6 after, market updates at 6:10, board summaries by 6:30. Her assistant Kendrick Shaw arrived promptly at 7, already armed with data points and charm. To everyone around her, Sloane was the embodiment of efficiency, sharp, beautiful, untouchable, the kind of leader who never hesitated, never faltered, the kind people feared disappointing. Yet the glass walls of her penthouse office kept more than just city noise out. They sealed her in. She had inherited Davenport Industries from her late father, the empire he built with grit and obsession. What she hadn't inherited was his warmth. Her father had always said, "Emotion is a liability, Sloane. Control is leadership." She had lived by that mantra so long it calcified into truth. But lately, cracks had started to show, unexplained restlessness, insomnia, flashes of doubt she pushed aside as weakness. The rooftop incident refused to leave her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the janitor's calm face behind the controls, the way he moved with effortless certainty. Kendrick noticed the distraction. "You're still thinking about that stunt," he said the next morning, pouring her coffee. "I'm thinking about why a janitor knew how to fly a $9 million aircraft," she replied flatly. "People learn strange hobbies," he joked, but the nervous laugh that followed betrayed discomfort. Sloane didn't smile. She had built her empire on information, knowing every player, every move, every hidden motive. Not knowing something felt like standing over an open trapdoor. Across the city, Owen Grant's morning looked very different. The alarm clock didn't wake him. The soft cough from the next room did. He was already up before the sun, pouring hot water into an old thermos. The apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon and laundry detergent. The walls were thin, the carpet worn, but it was home, safe, quiet, enough. His daughter, Maya, shuffled out of her room, still half asleep, clutching a blanket. "You forgot to charge your phone again," she said, voice small but stern. He smiled. "You'd make a good sergeant." She yawned and leaned against him. "Mrs. Gable says I'm bossy." "Mrs. Gable's never met a real leader," he said softly, brushing a tangle from her hair. Owen's mornings were a rhythm of care, checking her medication, packing lunch, fixing the loose strap on her backpack. Maya's health wasn't fragile anymore, but he still watched her like she might disappear if he blinked. 8 years earlier he had lost Sarah, his wife, during a rescue mission overseas. The sound of helicopter blades still carried ghosts. He'd walked away from that life, trading a flight helmet for a mop, medals for anonymity. To most people, he was just a quiet janitor who worked late and left no trace. No one asked about the limp in his right leg or the scars on his forearm. He preferred it that way. The world above, the boardrooms, the power suits, had no room for people like him anymore. That night, while Sloane sat in a penthouse office overlooking a skyline she owned, Owen stood in a hallway 50 floors below, buffing marble tiles until they gleamed. His hands knew discipline, his body still remembered missions he tried to forget. The echo of footsteps became his metronome. The hum of the cleaning machine drowned the noise of memory. When the clock hit midnight, he packed his cart and looked once more at the rooftop through the glass wall. The reflection of the city lights shimmered against it like fading stars. He could almost hear the rotor again, the sound of what he'd left behind. Upstairs, Sloane scrolled through her digital employee files, searching for one name: Owen Grant. The file was thin. Too thin. Hired 8 months ago. Address in a modest neighborhood. Background check clear. No references, no flagged records. Nothing unusual. On paper, he was invisible. For the first time in years, she felt the smallest chill of uncertainty. No one is invisible, she thought. Not in my company. But she closed the file without comment. Logic told her to forget it. Pride told her it didn't matter. Yet something quieter, something she didn't recognize, told her this man was a thread she shouldn't ignore. When she finally left for home, her reflection in the elevator glass looked different, less certain, almost human. Owen, meanwhile, returned to his apartment, where Maya had fallen asleep on the couch with her homework spread across her lap. He lifted her gently, carried her to bed, and lingered a moment in the doorway. "Good night, Firefly," he whispered. She stirred, half dreaming. "Good night, Daddy." In the dark, he sat at the kitchen table staring at a photo taped to the fridge. Sarah in her flight suit smiling beside him, the two of them standing under the spinning blades of a rescue chopper. He ran a thumb across the fading edges. Two different worlds, one built on control, the other on loss, were already orbiting toward collision. Sloane didn't know it yet, but her empire's next chapter wouldn't be written in boardrooms or spreadsheets. It would begin with the man she had once tried to humiliate, and the quiet life he fought so hard to protect. And somewhere deep inside her, a question she'd never dared ask began to echo. What if control wasn't strength after all? "Run it again," Sloane said. Kendrick glanced at her, uncertain. "We already did. Twice. There's nothing else to find." "Then keep looking," she snapped. It had been 3 days since the rooftop stunt, but the image still lived rent-free behind her eyes. The janitor, Owen Grant, starting that machine as if born to it. She'd ordered a complete audit the same night. Background checks, payroll, security clearance, even his tax filings. Every report came back the same. Clean. Too clean. Sloane stared at the sparse digital file glowing on her screen. No flight records, no certifications, no service history. 8 months at Davenport Industries, 3 lines of data, and a single address on the city's forgotten side. It was the first time in her career that information had refused to obey her. "Maybe he's just lucky," Kendrick said, half joking, half afraid. "No one's that lucky," she murmured. That same morning, her phone buzzed with a call she couldn't ignore. Arthur Lynn, the board's vice chairman. His tone was tight, polite only out of habit. "Tokyo is stalling again. Tanaka wants a revised equity clause." "That's impossible," Sloane replied. "They already agreed. They're cooling off. They sense uncertainty. You need to fix it." The line went dead. For the first time, she felt the edges of her empire shift. The Tanaka acquisition had been the keystone deal, the one that would secure Davenport's dominance in East Asia. If it collapsed, the shareholders would start circling. By noon, the office air was sharp with stress. Assistants whispered. Executives avoided her gaze. Kendrick floated in and out, balancing reassurance with updates that only deepened her unease. "Tanaka's chief liaison is claiming cultural misalignment," he reported. "They're offended by our negotiation tone." Sloane rubbed her temples. Translation: someone fed them inside intel. He hesitated. "Do you want me to trace it?" "I want you to fix it," she said, her voice soft but final. That night, alone in her penthouse, she pulled up Owen's file again. The glow of the screen caught the reflection of her own face. Tired, controlled, almost hollow. She clicked open the previous employment field. Self-employed, logistics and transport. Nothing else. Her father's voice echoed in memory. "Trust the details, Sloane. The truth always leaves a paper trail." But this man had left none. She poured herself another coffee and scrolled through the staff footage from the rooftop cameras. There he was, calm, deliberate, methodical. Every motion carried muscle memory, not curiosity, not guessing. No. Why would someone like that be pushing a mop? The next morning, she called Kendrick into her office. I want you to find everything. Not the public file, the real one. Bank history, military affiliations, travel logs, family connections. I don't care how you get it. Kendrick frowned. That's off protocol. So is hiring a ghost, she replied. Make it happen. He nodded, left, and within an hour the command had trickled down through quiet channels. But the day had other plans. By mid-afternoon, the Tokyo deal officially began to crumble. Messages poured in. Worried partners, agitated shareholders. Numbers that had always lined up cleanly now fell apart. On the screen, red figures replaced green ones. At 4:10 p.m. her phone buzzed again. Arthur Lynn, terse. You told me Tanaka was signed. What changed? Negotiation tactics, she said. They're testing our limits.
You don't have limits, Sloan. That's why we hired you. Fix it or the board will.
When the call ended, she sat perfectly still. Her empire was shaking, and for once she didn't have a countermeasure ready. Downstairs, the janitor was polishing the elevator doors, unaware or pretending not to be that the company above him was fracturing. His movements were steady, unhurried, a rhythm born from discipline. He finished the floor, parked the cart, and leaned against the wall for a moment. The fatigue wasn't from labor, it was from the mental load of constant vigilance. He had built a life out of invisibility, but invisibility couldn't erase the past. Not when every loud engine still triggered memory. When he stepped outside, a sleek black sedan waited at the curb. The woman from the rooftop stood beside it, her posture perfectly straight. Mr. Grant, she called. He froze. Ma'am, I need a word. His tone stayed polite but guarded. I'm off duty. I'll pay overtime. He almost smiled. That's not how it works for my position. Then consider it a personal request. Something in her voice made him pause. Not authority but weariness. He nodded once and followed her to the car. Inside, silence pressed between them. Finally she said, You flew that helicopter. Perfectly. That isn't something you learn from YouTube. He didn't look at her. No, ma'am. So you admit it. I admit nothing. Who trained you? He turned, eyes calm, unflinching. Why does it matter? Because I run a company that employs over 40,000 people. I need to know who's inside my walls. Owen studied her for a beat. And I need to keep my job, so if it's all the same, ma'am, I'll keep mopping floors. Sloan exhaled sharply, half laughing, half furious. You think hiding makes you safe? The world doesn't work that way. He finally met her eyes. You'd be surprised how quiet the world gets when you stop trying to own it. For the first time, she had no comeback. When she dropped him off near a modest row of apartment blocks, he gave a polite nod. Good night, Miss Davenport. Good night, Mr. Grant. As the car pulled away, Sloan caught sight of him through the rear window, disappearing into a stairwell, swallowed by the glow of a flickering streetlight. Back in her office, Kendrick was waiting with new bad news. Tokyo's walking. The board's in panic mode. Sloan's expression hardened. Then we fight. Fight how? We've lost leverage. She turned toward the window where her helicopter sat under floodlights, gleaming like a silent witness. Her mind connected the impossible threads. A failing deal that required absolute discretion, and a man who could vanish off paper yet fly through a storm without leaving a trace. What if, she murmured, more to herself than to Kendrick. The person I need most is the one I don't understand at all. Kendrick frowned. What are you talking about? Nothing yet, she said, already thinking 3 moves ahead. But I intend to find out who Owen Grant really is. Outside, rain began to fall, a soft percussion against the glass. Somewhere beneath that same sky, the janitor closed his daughter's bedroom door, unaware that the powerful woman who once mocked him was about to entangle both their worlds in a fight neither could afford to lose. Kendrick's voice carried that smooth confidence Sloan had once trusted. The revised proposal's gone out. They'll respond within the hour, he said, sliding a tablet across her desk. Sloan scanned the numbers, her jaw tightening. This clause, temporary equity adjustment, that wasn't in our discussion. It's leverage, he said easily, a gesture of goodwill. It shows flexibility. She gave him a look that could cut glass. It shows weakness, Kendrick. Tanaka doesn't respect weakness. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Sloan, they were seconds from walking. I made a call. You pay me to protect the deal, not your pride. Her pulse flickered. No one spoke to her like that. Not in her office, not in her empire, but the exhaustion of endless crises dulled her edge. She signed against When the response from Tokyo arrived later that evening, it was brutal. Tanaka's board thanked her for the humility, but demanded deeper concessions, her inbox filled with alarmed messages. The share value dropped overnight. For the first time in years, Sloane Davenport had miscalculated. She closed her office door, staring at her reflection in the dark glass. Her father's words echoed again. Emotion is a liability. And yet, it was emotion that now filled the hollow room. Anger, confusion, and something closer to shame. Her mind drifted back to the rooftop. The one moment in recent memory where control had completely left her hands. The janitor's face, calm under the roar of the blades, flashed before her. By morning, she'd made a decision. She found Owen on the 40th floor, kneeling beside a vending machine with a toolbox open beside him. "We need to talk," she said. He didn't look up. "About cleaning schedules? I already sent the report." "About you," she said, her tone sharp enough to make him pause. Finally he stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Ma'am, if this is about the helicopter, it's about honesty," she cut in. "You embarrassed me in front of my entire staff. You operate a multi-million-dollar aircraft like a professional pilot, and now I'm supposed to believe you're just a janitor." He didn't flinch. "That's exactly what I am. Don't insult my intelligence." He exhaled slowly, as if steadying himself. "I fix things, Ms. Davenport. Floors, lights, sometimes aircraft egos. That's all." Her frustration cracked into anger. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? You could have caused an accident, a lawsuit, a headline." He met her gaze, calm but unyielding. "And yet here we are. Safe, clean floor, no headline." The simplicity of his reply made her want to scream. "You think this is a game?" "No," he said. "I think you're looking for answers that won't make you feel better." For a moment, the silence between them was heavier than words. "Who are you hiding from?" she asked quietly. Owen's face changed just a flicker, a shadow that passed too fast to catch. "We done?" She stepped closer. "If there's something in your past that threatens my company, I need to know." "There isn't." "Then why the secrecy?" He looked down at the rag in his hands, twisting it once before replying. "Because not every truth deserves an audience." Something inside her faltered. He didn't sound defensive. He sounded tired, like someone who'd already told too many truths in his lifetime. Before she could speak again, her phone buzzed. Kendrick's name. She turned away to answer. "What now?" "The board's calling an emergency session tomorrow," he said. "Arthur wants an explanation for the drop. They're questioning your judgment." Her stomach clenched. "You told me the adjustments were safe." "I told you they were necessary," he said, and ended the call. When she turned back, Owen was gone. Only the faint smell of cleaning fluid lingered in the hallway. That night Sloane's world felt smaller. Every message, every alert, every number seemed to blur into noise. She stared out over the city, its lights trembling through the haze, and wondered for the first time if control was an illusion she'd been taught to worship. Down on the other side of the city, Owen's apartment was quiet except for the sound of Maya's laughter. She sat cross-legged on the couch, drawing shapes on an old tablet. "Does this look like a volcano?" she asked. He studied it seriously. "It looks like the best volcano I've ever seen." She grinned. "It's for my science fair. Mrs. Gable says real volcanoes start deep underground, like secrets." That word caught him off guard. Secrets. He smiled anyway. Smart teacher. "Are you okay, Daddy?"
He hesitated.
"Yeah. Just tired." She leaned against him, small and warm. "You work too much. Somebody's gotta keep the lights on. Mom used to say that too." The words hit like a quiet bullet. He nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah. She did." They sat like that for a long time, his arm around her, the faint hum of the city outside. Later, when Maya was asleep, Owen opened a small wooden box on his nightstand. Inside lay a single photograph, him and Sarah standing beside a rescue chopper, wind whipping their uniforms, both smiling, beneath it a silver dog tag dulled by time. He turned it over in his fingers, reading the engraved words, "Captain Sarah Grant." He closed his eyes. The memory played out in fragments. The mission, the explosion, the silence after. He'd sworn never to fly again, never to risk his daughter growing up without him. And yet that rooftop had cracked something open, a single act of impulse that had drawn attention he couldn't afford. He glanced at the small nightlight glowing near Maya's bed. "I won't let them take this from us," he whispered. Across town, Sloane sat in her dim office, reviewing the wreckage of numbers and messages. Her company was bleeding, her authority questioned, and the man who might hold a missing piece refused to speak. In that moment, both of them, CEO and janitor, power and humility, felt the same thing for entirely different reasons. The slow, sinking awareness that the walls they'd built around themselves were starting to crack. And in the cracks, the first light of something new was beginning to show, though neither was ready to see it yet. The boardroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the projector. Graphs dipped like falling heartbeats. Every number on the screen looked like failure written in ink. Sloane stood at the head of the table, shoulders square, jaw locked. On the surface she was still the same composed CEO, but her pulse betrayed her. Arthur Lynn cleared his throat. "We've given you wide autonomy, Sloane, but the Tokyo deal was mishandled. The perception of instability is spreading." "Mishandled?" she repeated. "We adapted. That's what leadership is." Arthur didn't flinch. "Leadership is results. Tanaka's board now doubts our capacity to deliver. If this continues, the stock will slide further. The investors will want assurance." She caught the unspoken word, replacement. Kendrick stepped in before she could speak, voice smooth and measured. "Arthur, the setback is temporary. I'm already working on an alternative channel to re-engage Tanaka's liaison. Ms. Davenport just needs time to recalibrate." Arthur nodded, though his expression remained cold. "Then fix it, quickly." When they left, Sloane remained at the table. The lights dimmed automatically, the room's emptiness pressing against her. Kendrick lingered at the doorway. "You shouldn't let them see doubt," he said. "I didn't," she replied. "They saw blood, not doubt." He gave a small smile. "Same thing in this business." After he left, Sloane exhaled for the first time in hours. For someone who had spent her life commanding boardrooms, the silence now felt heavy, like judgment. She turned toward the panoramic window, watching the city blink beneath her feet. She had always loved the view. It reminded her of control, of distance. But tonight the skyline looked unfamiliar, alive, unpredictable. Down below, in a janitor's closet on the 20th floor, Owen Grant was quietly putting away his mop. His hands were steady, but his thoughts were not. He could feel the pressure closing in. Ever since that rooftop stunt, the air in the building had changed. Security had grown tighter. Background verifications had restarted. He could feel the eyes on him. Administrators glancing twice. Elevators pausing longer on his floor. He'd made a mistake. For 8 months he had managed to live like a shadow, unseen, unimportant, free. But one impulsive moment of arrogance, one half-forgotten instinct to prove he still could, had undone years of careful invisibility. He looked down at his reflection in the polished metal of the elevator doors. The man looking back wasn't a janitor. He was something older, harder. Someone he'd buried long ago. When he got home, Maya was waiting with her backpack and a hopeful grin. "Guess what? Mrs. Gable says my volcano's going to win." He smiled, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Of course it is. You're the best engineer in your class." "I'm not an engineer," she said, giggling. "I'm a scientist." "Even better." She started talking about baking soda and lava colors, and for a few minutes the world shrank to something simple again. He cooked her dinner, checked her medicine, helped her finish homework. Every ordinary task reminded him why he'd built this life in the first place, to keep her safe, far from the chaos that once defined him. After she went to bed, he sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the quiet apartment. He opened the drawer where he kept the wooden box, the one with Sarah's photo and his dog tag. He didn't open it. He just rested his hand on it, like pressing down on an old scar. "Stay buried," he muttered. Across town, Sloane sat alone in her penthouse, scrolling through a flood of emails she didn't have the strength to answer. Her fingers hovered over Owen's file again. The same empty data field stared back at her. No records, no references, no trace. Her mind replayed their conversation near the vending machine. His calm tone, the way he said not every truth deserves an audience. She had spent her life clawing for transparency, demanding control over every variable, every person, every outcome. Yet the more she stared at that blank file, the more she realized how little she understood about the people under her command. Her father's voice haunted her again. "Emotion is a liability." Maybe it was, but right now she didn't feel like a leader without it. She felt like a machine winding down. The next morning, Kendrick walked in uninvited, holding a cup of coffee. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said lightly. "Spare me the observation." He set the cup on her desk. "We can still salvage this. I'll handle the calls to Tokyo. You focus on appearances." If the board senses weakness, they'll move for your chair. She didn't respond. You built this empire, Sloane, he continued. Don't let one mistake tear it down. She looked up at him then, really looked, and for a flicker she saw it. The faint smirk of someone who wasn't panicking at all, someone who might even be enjoying her unraveling. The thought came and went before she could name it. After he left, she whispered under her breath, I don't even know who to trust anymore. The rest of the day passed like a blur. Meetings, signatures, rehearsed reassurances. Her voice stayed steady, but inside she was unspooling thread by thread. At dusk she found herself once again staring out of the window toward the helipad, the same place where all of this began. The helicopter gleamed under the fading light, still and silent. She thought of him, of the quiet janitor with the eyes that had seen too much, and wondered what kind of past could teach someone to move that way, to face power without flinching. Maybe he wasn't running from something, maybe he was surviving it. And then, almost unwillingly, another thought followed. Maybe that's what I've been doing too. That night, two people in the same city, divided by floor numbers and circumstance, sat alone in different silences. She feared failure. He feared exposure. Both of them clung to control as if letting go would mean losing everything. But storms don't last forever, and in the quiet that follows, something always begins to move, something small, unseen, and unstoppable. Neither of them knew it yet, but their next meeting would not be born of anger or pride. It would be born of necessity. Sloane Davenport hated company picnics. They were a necessary illusion. Smiles for cameras, small talk for investors, staged humanity for employees who otherwise saw her as an ice sculpture in heels. Every year she'd make an appearance for 20 minutes, shake a few hands, then leave before anyone noticed she didn't belong among them. But this year she stayed. The field behind the corporate campus buzzed with noise, children shrieking near the bounce houses, food trucks lining the fence, executives trying too hard to look casual. Sloane stood by the refreshment tent, sunglasses on, clutching a bottled water she had no intention of drinking. She was there for one reason only: Owen Grant. She spotted him near the small lake at the edge of the park. No mop, no uniform, just jeans, a gray t-shirt, and a quiet focus that made him look younger somehow. Beside him had a little girl, no older than 8, her brown hair pulled into a messy braid. They were building something, a small boat made from a leaf, a stick and string. The sight didn't fit any box in Sloane's world. The man she'd labeled as a mystery, a problem, a liability, was laughing. Not loudly, but softly, in a way that reached the eyes. "Grant," she called before she could stop herself. He looked up instantly. The reaction was small but sharp. The quick flicker of guardedness, as though he'd been caught off duty by an old commander. The child glanced up too, studying Sloane with the fearless curiosity only children have. "Ma'am," Owen said, standing automatically. "You didn't have to come out here." "I wanted to see the human side of my company," she replied, trying for levity but hearing the stiffness in her own voice. The girl tugged on Owen's sleeve. "Daddy, who's that?" "This is Ms. Davenport," he said gently. "My boss." Sloane knelt slightly so she wasn't towering over the child. "And who are you?" "Maya," the girl said, unblinking. "We're building a boat for the Frog King. It has excellent balance." Sloane smiled despite herself. "I see. That's good engineering." "She's the chief architect," Owen said dryly. The moment hovered. Awkward but genuine. Sloane glanced between them, and felt a strange pull, an echo of something she hadn't felt in years. She used to make model airplanes with her father at that age. Before he'd traded playtime for boardrooms. Before she'd learned that affection was weakness. Maya examined Sloane again. "Your face looks serious. Are you mad about the grass?" Caught off guard, Sloane blinked. "No, not mad about the grass." "Okay," Maya said, satisfied, and turned back to her project. Owen's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "She doesn't do subtle." "I can respect that," Sloane said. For a minute they stood there in silence, watching the small leaf boat bob on the surface of the water. The world around them blurred into laughter and chatter, but the air felt calm here, almost separate from the rest of the event. Then, somewhere across the park, a faint mechanical buzz began to rise. A drone, one of the marketing team's new toys, zigzagged above the crowd. It swooped low, circling for footage. The noise reached them, sharp, slicing, rhythmic. Sloane barely noticed it at first, but she saw the change in Owen. His posture straightened, every muscle tensing in a way that didn't belong to a janitor or a father. His eyes tracked the drone with surgical precision. The expression on his face emptied, no warmth, no thought, Only focus. When the drone dipped too close, he flinched, just slightly, but enough. His right hand twitched toward his side to a place where a weapon used to hang. The air around him shifted. "Grant?" Sloane's voice came out softer than she intended. He blinked once, twice. The sound receded. The tension broke. He exhaled, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off an invisible weight. "Sorry," he said quietly. "Old habits." Sloane studied him, not with suspicion this time, but understanding. That single moment had revealed more about him than any background check ever could. It wasn't arrogance or secrecy that kept him hidden. It was pain. "Military?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Something like that. Maya looked up, puzzled. "Daddy?" Owen crouched beside her, forcing a smile. "Everything's fine, Firefly. Just got startled by the noise." She nodded, unfazed, and ran off toward the ice cream truck. When she was gone, Sloane said quietly, "That wasn't just noise, was it?" He stared after his daughter. "Doesn't matter what it was. It's over." But his voice said otherwise. There was a heaviness there, a history too deep for explanation. Sloane folded her arms. "You could have been anywhere, any job. Why choose to be here of all places?" "Because it's quiet," he said. "Because no one looks twice at the janitor. You don't strike me as a man who hides." "Maybe not," he replied. "But I know when to stop being seen." She wanted to press further, to ask what had happened, who he had been before, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't defiance, it was a wall built out of grief. He turned back toward the lake, where Maya's tiny boat drifted in circles. "You ever notice," he said after a moment, "that the higher people climb, the less they look down?" Sloane frowned. Meaning sometimes the view from the top makes you forget what the ground feels like. She didn't have a response for that. For years she'd looked down on everything, literally and metaphorically, from glass offices, private jets, rooftop helipads. And yet for all her height, she suddenly felt small in front of this man who swept her floors. Maya came running back with 2 cones of melting ice cream. "Daddy?" They had chocolate. She handed one to him, then turned to Sloane. "Do you want one too?" Sloane hesitated, then took it. "Thank you." Maya grinned. "You look less serious now." Owen's quiet laugh broke the tension like sunlight through clouds. Sloane laughed too awkwardly, but real. They spent a few more minutes together, just long enough for the world to shift. When Sloane finally excused herself, Maya waved as if they were already friends. As she walked back toward the main tents, Sloane felt something unfamiliar pressing against her chest. Not anxiety, not irritation, but empathy. The man she'd once treated like a curiosity was now a mirror she couldn't ignore. She thought of his flinch at the drone's buzz, of the instinct to protect his child without a word, and for the first time she understood what kind of courage hides behind silence. Owen watched her leave, his daughter's hand wrapped in his. Part of him wished she wouldn't look back, and part of him wished she would. When she disappeared into the crowd, he finally exhaled. The world had seen too much of him again. He'd have to be careful now. Neither of them knew it, but the bridge between them had already begun to form, built not from power or pity, but from recognition. 2 people who lived their lives holding everything together had just seen for one brief moment what it looked like to let go. The storm began with numbers, not thunder. By the time Sloane arrived at the office Monday morning, the Tokyo deal had officially collapsed. The investors had withdrawn, citing leadership instability. Within an hour, 3 other partners requested meetings. Davenport Industries was bleeding credibility, and the media could already smell the story. Her father's name was slipping from the pedestal it had lived on for 2 decades. Kendrick pretended to help, but she saw it now, the tiny delays, the missing memos, the way he forgot to copy her on key communications. Something in him had shifted from loyalty to opportunism. He didn't want to save her. He wanted her chair. That realization was the breaking point. By noon she sat alone in her office. The skyline blurred by rain outside. The walls felt smaller, her reflection older. All the arrogance, all the certainty, it had drained away, replaced by something she never known before. Humility. And then she thought of him. Owen Grant, the janitor who could fly a helicopter, the man who looked at her without fear, who carried silence like armor. She didn't want to admit it, but a thought kept circling her mind. He never loses control, even when I do. That evening, she drove herself, no driver, no assistant, to the maintenance wing. The building was mostly empty, lights low. She found him in a corridor tightening a bolt on a broken handrail. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. "Ma'am." I need your help, she said simply. He blinked, suspicious. With what? The floors? With a flight. He froze, wrench still in his hand. That's not funny. It's not a joke. I have to meet someone. Someone who can fix what's falling apart. Then take your pilot. I can't. She took a slow breath. The board's watching every move. This has to be off record, discreet, quiet. He studied her face. The sharp edges were still there, but softened by something real. Fear, maybe. He'd seen that look before on people about to do something desperate. Why me? He asked. Because you don't ask questions, she said. And because you're the only person I trust not to betray me. He laughed, short and humorless. You don't know me well enough to trust me. And yet, she said. I do. He looked at the floor. The last time he'd been in a cockpit, Sarah's voice had been in his headset. He'd promised her, after the wreck, never again. But the woman standing before him wasn't a CEO right now. She was a person standing on the edge, clinging to something invisible. Where to? He asked finally. Port Haven Airfield. 2 hours south. There's a contact waiting there. Kinji Ito. If I can convince him to vouch for me, Tokyo reopens talks. If I don't. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Owen exhaled. It's storm season. You know that, right? I know, she said quietly. But I also know I'm out of options. He turned away, wiped his hands on a rag. You're asking me to break a few federal laws. I'll handle the consequences. He gave her a long look. That's not how consequences work. Neither spoke for a moment. The thunder outside rolled closer, rattling the windows. Finally he said, You're not used to asking for help, are you? No, she admitted. I was raised to think needing people makes you weak. Whoever told you that, he said, lied. Something in the tone, the calm certainty cut straight through her. Please, Owen, she said softly. I need this chance. He closed his eyes. The promise he'd made to Sarah echoed like a ghost. Don't fly again. Not after this. But the storm outside was rising, and so was something else inside him. The feeling that maybe this flight wasn't about breaking a promise, but keeping one. Saving someone who still had a life to save. He opened his eyes. You'll meet me on the roof at 10 p.m. If we're doing this, we're doing it my way. She nodded, relief flickering across her face. Understood. At 9:57 p.m. the helipad was slick with rain. The city below was a sea of lights and mist. Sloane arrived in a dark coat, holding the same expression she'd worn during board presentations, controlled, unreadable, but her hands trembled. The helicopter waited, engines silent. Owen stood beside it, checking rotors and instruments by flashlight. The rain clung to his hair and jacket. When she approached, he handed her a headset. Strap in. Don't touch anything unless I say. Understood, Captain, she said, trying to sound calm. He gave her a look. Not angry, not amused, just measured. Then he climbed in, and within moments the cockpit came alive. Lights blinked. Gauges hummed. The storm growled on the horizon. The first lift was smooth, almost too smooth. Sloane felt the weight of the world drop away beneath them. The city shrank, swallowed by cloud. Owen's voice came through the headset, calm and firm. Stay focused on breathing. Storm cells move fast, this time of year. I'm fine, she said, though her knuckles were white against her seatbelt. He glanced at her, saw the lie and said nothing. Minutes stretched into silence. Just the thrum of rotors and the heartbeat rhythm of rain against glass. Then unexpectedly she spoke. What happened to you? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed on the instruments. You wouldn't believe me. Try me. Rescue pilot. Military unit. We pulled people out of hell and sometimes didn't come back. And you? She asked softly. Didn't come back either, he said. The words landed heavy between them. She didn't pry. She just listened. After a while she said, You know, when I was younger I thought leadership meant control. That if you could just hold tight enough, nothing would fall apart. Doesn't work like that, he said. No, she whispered. It doesn't. Lightning cracked in the distance. The cabin flashed white for a heartbeat. Owen adjusted the controls, eyes forward. Sometimes you just have to ride it out. The rest of the flight passed in near silence, two people suspended between earth and sky, between pride and surrender. When they finally landed at Port Haven, Sloane let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Owen powered down the engine, and the sudden quiet felt almost sacred. Why did you do it? She asked. Why agree to this? He shrugged. Because sometimes you help people who remind you of the person you used to be. She turned toward him. And who was that? He smiled faintly. Someone who thought he could save everyone. For the first time she didn't have a response. When they stepped out into the rain, the storm had eased to a drizzle. The world smelled of wet asphalt and salt air. Somewhere in that silence between exhaustion and gratitude, something fragile shifted between them. Not admiration, not romance, but understanding. The first hint of trust. And with it the smallest possibility that both of them might still learn how to fly again. The meeting at Port Haven lasted less than an hour. Kenji Ito, the quiet Japanese investor Sloane had once called a friend, listened without interrupting as she explained her plan to rebuild the partnership. Her voice carried conviction again, but it was a fragile kind, the kind born from desperation, not power. When she finished, Kenji nodded slowly. "You've changed," he said. "Before you negotiated like a machine. Tonight you sound human." Sloane met his eyes. Machines break down. Humans rebuild. He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what Tanaka needs to hear. I will speak to them again." For the first time in days, she felt hope. Not triumph, just the quiet sense of being seen. Outside, the storm was still raging. Owen stood beside the helicopter checking the fuel levels. The rain blurred the world into gray. When Sloane approached, he looked up. He agreed. "Maybe," she said. "That's more than I expected. Then let's get you home before this gets worse." The wind had picked up. The first few minutes of flight were manageable. Rain streaking across the windshield. The horizon swallowed by clouds. Sloane tried to steady her breathing, watching his hands on the controls, precise, patient, sure. Every movement spoke of discipline earned through pain. Then the turbulence hit. The helicopter lurched sideways. Warning lights flickered. Sloane gasped, gripping the harness. Owen's voice was calm, even through the static. "Stay still, we're fine." Lightning flashed, followed by a concussive crack that rattled the cabin. The aircraft dipped once, then again harder. The world outside became chaos. Black, white, water, sky. No difference between any of them. "Are we?" "Not yet," he said tightly, adjusting the cyclic. "Hold on." The storm around them felt almost alive, roaring, clawing, testing. The turbulence mirrored what both had carried inside for years, the need to control something uncontrollable. Sloane's thoughts spun. Her father's voice, the board's judgment, Kendrick's smirk, the empire she'd built, now hanging by threads thinner than the ones holding this aircraft together. "Why aren't you panicking?" she shouted over the roar. "Because panic doesn't help," he replied. "Trust me." "I'm trying." "Then start by breathing." She did. One inhale, one exhale, until the shaking softened. The worst of the storm began to fade. As the clouds thinned, a faint glow appeared ahead. The city lights of Davenport below, glimmering like stars in a glass jar. Owen guided the helicopter lower, smooth and steady, until they touched down on the corporate helipad. For a moment neither moved. The silence was deafening after so much noise. Sloane let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. He looked over, meeting her eyes. "You okay?" She nodded. "I think I just remembered what trust feels like." He gave a quiet half-smile. "Careful, it's addictive." What they didn't know was that while they were fighting wind and lightning, Kendrick Shaw had been fighting his own battle, one he intended to win. The first email went out just after midnight. Subject: CEO endangers company in unauthorized helicopter mission. Within minutes, the internal network buzzed with whispers. Screenshots followed, leaked flight logs, falsified security footage showing Sloane boarding the aircraft without clearance. Kendrick had planned every detail, the timing, the witnesses, even the tone of scandal. By sunrise, every major outlet had the story. Davenport CEO risks corporate assets in reckless night flight amid financial turmoil. The photos looked damning. Sloane stepping into the helicopter under heavy rain. No context, no explanation. To the world, it looked like a desperate power play. To the board, it looked like evidence of instability. When Sloane arrived that morning, she felt the change before she saw it. Conversations halted as she passed. Eyes followed her. Arthur Lynn was waiting in her office, holding a printed article. "What is this?" he demanded. She read the headline once, twice before whispering, "This isn't true." Then, "Explain it." "I went to secure the deal off record. I had no choice." Arthur's face was carved from disappointment. "You broke protocol, Sloane. You risked liability, and you dragged a maintenance employee into it. That man saved my life, and now he's gone," Arthur said. "Your janitor resigned this morning. No forwarding address." She froze. "He what?" "Whatever this was, it ends now. The board convenes at noon. You'll attend and answer for it." When he left, she sank into her chair. The walls that had once made her feel invincible now felt like a cage. She checked her inbox, 50 unread messages, most with subject lines beginning with urgent or statement required. Among them one from Kendrick. Just trying to help you manage the fallout. Let me know if you want me to handle PR. Sloane's stomach turned. She replayed every smirk, every delay, every convenient mistake. The puzzle fit too neatly. He'd done this. And she'd let him. On the other side of the city, Owen stood on his apartment balcony, duffel bag at his feet. Maya was still asleep inside, her small breath steady in the dark. He watched the rain trace lines down the glass, thinking of the flight, the moment when the storm had felt almost cleansing. He'd broken his promise. He'd flown again. He should have felt guilt. Instead, he felt something else. Alive, maybe, or angry. When his phone buzzed, he ignored it. Then it buzzed again. He finally checked. A message from an unknown number. They're blaming her for the flight. Leaks everywhere. She doesn't know who to trust. No name, no signature. But he knew. Sloane. He exhaled through his teeth, running a hand through his hair. He should walk away. He should protect Maya. That was the deal he made with himself. Stay small. Stay invisible. But the image of Sloane sitting in the cockpit, hands trembling but refusing to give up, burned behind his eyes. She had trusted him, and he'd left her to take the fall. At Davenport headquarters, the press had already begun to gather. Cameras, reporters, the hungry smell of blood in the air. Sloane stood by her office window staring down at the swarm. Her phone buzzed again. Another call from Arthur. Another demand for explanations she couldn't give without revealing Owen's secret. The thunder outside had quieted, but inside the real storm was just beginning. She thought of the words Owen had said in the air. Sometimes you just have to ride it out. Maybe he was right. Maybe the only way out was through. But as the first flashes of cameras began below, Sloane knew this wasn't just a crisis. It was war. And this time, the battlefield wasn't the sky, it was her own company. Owen had tried to disappear again. He'd packed the go-bag, ready to vanish before dawn, ready to keep the promise he'd made to his daughter. No more flying. No more chaos. But when the news reports began flashing on the small TV in his apartment, he froze. Davenport CEO Sloane Davenport under investigation for reckless conduct. A photo of Sloane filled the screen, hair soaked from rain, eyes defiant beneath the headline that painted her insane. Owen turned off the TV and sat in silence. The guilt hit harder than the storm they'd flown through. He had let her fall alone. Then he noticed something else, a thread buried inside the reports. They quoted internal sources and referenced network audit files, files that by company protocol, only one person could access. Kendrick Shaw. Owen exhaled through his teeth, instincts flicking back on like a switch. He pulled out his old laptop from the closet, the one that didn't connect to any network, the one he'd kept from his military days. The soldier in him, the strategist, the quiet operator. He was back. He slid in a flash drive, booted a hidden program, and began digging through cached corporate data he'd quietly mirrored during years of janitorial night shifts. Back then, it was habit, always keep an exit strategy. Now, it was a lifeline. For hours, lines of code scrolled down the screen. Each log was a heartbeat, each file a clue. Then he saw it, a repeated ghost port address. K archive. It wasn't standard. It wasn't even on the company's map. He leaned closer. Got you. Kendrick hadn't just leaked internal data. He'd built a hidden server partition that siphoned proprietary files and rerouted them through an encrypted shell, one that looked like a harmless backup folder. It was a spy network inside Sloane's own empire. Owen began tracing the signals, his fingers moving fast and precise. Every keystroke carried the rhythm of old missions, the focus that came before the drop. The deeper he went, the uglier it became. Correspondence with Tanaka executives, manipulated profit projections, even doctored emails, meant to make Sloane look unstable. Kendrick had orchestrated everything. He leaned back, jaw tight. The janitor who swept floors had just uncovered an act of corporate treason, but knowing wasn't enough. He needed proof that would stand, not just in the boardroom but in the public eye. He created a packet sniffer script, one he'd written years ago for a rescue mission that required intercepting hostile comms. He modified it to capture outgoing traffic from Kendrick's terminal. The program would record every keystroke, every command. He smiled grimly. You wanted a ghost, Kendrick. You're about to meet one. At Davenport Tower, Sloane stood before the board like a woman walking into her own trial. Arthur Lynn sat at the head of the table. Kendrick, composed and sympathetic, occupied the chair beside him. The position she used to hold. "This meeting is to address recent events," Arthur began. "Your unauthorized flight has put the company at risk. The shareholders are demanding an explanation." Sloane's voice was steady, but her pulse pounded. "I made that flight to save a deal that Kendrick's division had already endangered. It wasn't reckless, it was necessary." Kendrick sighed. His tone rehearsed empathy. "Sloane, no one doubts your intentions. But flying into a storm, with an untrained civilian, that's not leadership, that's desperation." The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were calculated. Kendrick knew how to sound like reason itself. Arthur folded his hands. "Can you produce evidence that supports your claim? Any documentation, communication, or witness statement?" Sloane hesitated. Owen was gone. There were no flight recordings, no corroborating records. The truth was in the hands of a man who had vanished to protect his child. "I did what I had to," she said quietly. "Because no one else would." Murmurs rippled around the table. She could feel the verdict forming before the vote had even begun. Across the city, Owen's fingers kept typing. He monitored the live network stream from his backdoor access to the company's servers. The trap was set. All he needed was Kendrick to panic, to try and cover his tracks. Then Owen could trace his movements, expose his archive, and record his digital fingerprints. He checked the clock. 10:43 a.m. The board meeting was happening now. He pictured Sloane standing alone in that glass-walled room, fighting the same war he once fought. A war against silence, against people who hid behind authority. A memory flashed. Sarah's hand in his, their last flight together. "You can't save everyone, Owen." Maybe not. But he could save one. He opened a secure channel, pinging into the internal admin system. The line blinked green. He was inside. Kendrick's terminal ID appeared active. Perfect. Owen executed the script. Within seconds, data packets streamed in. Email timestamps, internal messages, encryption logs. He captured them all, one after another, until a specific command line appeared. Purge. Partition K archiving. Owen's lips curved. "And that's the nail in your coffin." He copied the entire session log, embedding the timestamp and network ID. The evidence was airtight. Back at Davenport Tower, Sloane's patience had reached its limit. "You want to talk about recklessness?" she snapped, rising from her chair. "Recklessness is letting a man like Kendrick Shaw manipulate this company from the inside while you all look the other way. Check the audit log. He's been falsifying projections, feeding misinformation, and now he's trying to replace me with his version of stability." Kendrick chuckled softly. "You're upset, Sloane. Maybe take a breath. We've all been under stress. I'm not the one hiding a knife behind a smile." Arthur's voice cut through the tension. "Enough. This isn't a courtroom." "No," Sloane said, her tone low but firm. "It's worse, because here, you let liars look like leaders." She grabbed her folder of notes, empty defense just for show, and turned toward the window. The city below looked indifferent. The skyline that had once been her crown now just another cage. She whispered under her breath, more to herself than anyone. "If truth still means anything, let it find me." Miles away, Owen hit send. The file, encrypted and untraceable, left his laptop and found its way to 3 inboxes. The board chair, the legal counsel, and Sloane Davenport. He leaned back, the adrenaline finally fading. Maya's small voice called from the other room, asking about breakfast. He smiled faintly, closing the laptop. "Just fixing something, Firefly," he said softly. In the middle of the meeting, Sloane's phone buzzed once, a quiet vibration against the polished table. There was no sender, no subject, just a single file called Truth.Seep. She opened it without thinking, and what she read made her heart stop. It said that the source of all the company's network problems wasn't her, it was Kendrick. The message clearly stated that his login, under his own name, had been used earlier that morning to delete secure company files. She looked up slowly, her eyes locking on him as he continued talking, smooth and confident, unaware that his mask was already cracking. For the first time, Sloane smiled. She wasn't alone anymore. The storm wasn't over, but now, for the first time, she had the wind at her back. The boardroom felt like a courtroom, one without mercy. The rain outside streaked against the windows, the storm echoing the tension in the air. Sloane stood at the head of the table, the accused among her own empire. Across from her sat Kendrick, immaculate in his suit, playing the role of the calm, concerned executive. Arthur Lynn adjusted his glasses. "Miss Davenport, The board has reviewed multiple reports of erratic behavior, including your unauthorized flight and the subsequent PR fallout. Your judgment has come into question. Sloane straightened her posture. Her voice was quiet, but every syllable cut through the hum of the rain. My judgment is the only reason this company exists today. I didn't risk my life for attention. I risked it to save a deal your golden boy here almost destroyed. Kendrick's practiced smile didn't waver. You mean the same deal Tanaka's board has since called reckless. You gambled billions on a personal stunt, Sloane. You brought a janitor on a classified mission. You endangered assets, credibility, and lives. The insult landed hard, but Sloane didn't flinch. That janitor, she said evenly, is worth more than everyone in this room who mistook loyalty for obedience. Arthur's tone sharpened. We're not here for rhetoric. We need proof of your version, not your feelings. Sloane's hands tightened at her sides. The flash drive from Owen was still in her phone, unopened until now. Proof, she thought. Then let them see it. But before she could speak, Kendrick leaned forward, voice silken and deadly. Arthur, there's more. I have emails showing Sloane personally concealed losses from the board to protect her own image. The room went still. Sloane turned to him slowly. That's a lie. Then explain why your signature appears on a falsified Q3 report. He tapped his tablet, projecting the forged data onto the main screen. Her name, her credentials, everything appeared legitimate. The board members murmured. Sloane felt the world narrowing, the air too thin. Her heart pounded, not in fear but fury. You forged that. Kendrick met her gaze calmly. Or maybe you're losing track of what's real. It was the perfect setup. Calm against chaos. The loyal deputy against the unstable leader. Arthur sighed, weary. Enough. Unless you can disprove this now, the board will have to vote on your removal. Sloane's phone buzzed once, vibrating on the table. A single message flashed across the screen. From unknown. Subject, run it now. Okay, G. She stared at it for half a second. Then without another word she tapped the attachment Owen had sent earlier. The boardroom lights flickered. The giant display froze mid-projection. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, a cascade of red alerts flooded every screen in the room. Network integrity failure source. Partition K archiving. Arthur shot up. What in the world? Kendrick paled. That's impossible. The system rebooted itself and the main display filled with lines of code. An automatic diagnostic feed. In bright red text appeared. User ID, KASH4W. Initiated purge command at 09117 AM.
Action, deletion of secure company files.
Status, recorded and archived. Gasps rippled through the board. Sloane's pulse slowed. She didn't need to say a word. The truth was saying it for her. Kendrick's composure cracked. No. That's not someone's tampering. Keep talking, Sloane said. Her tone sharp and cold. Maybe the system will believe you. Arthur turned to him, face hard. Is this true? Did you delete files this morning? Of course not, Kendrick stammered. This is a setup. She's using some hacker. Another window opened automatically, displaying a live video feed from the company's security server. The footage showed Kendrick in his office barely an hour ago, typing frantically at his computer. Owen's voice came through the speakers, recorded, calm, steady. When he tries to erase the truth, let him dig his own grave. The timing was flawless. The board stared, speechless. Every line of Kendrick's betrayal was unraveling in real time. His fake data logs, his correspondence with Tanaka, the financial siphoning from shadow accounts. The perfect corporate crime now exposed in front of the people he had fooled. Arthur's voice broke the silence. Mr. Shaw, you are hereby suspended pending full investigation. Security will escort you. Kendrick lunged toward the table, wild-eyed. You can't. You don't understand. She's the one. Two guards entered, firm hands gripping his arms. He struggled for a moment, shouting fragments of denial that no one cared to hear. When the doors shut behind him, silence settled again. Heavy, cleansing, final. Arthur turned to Sloane. The frost in his expression melted into shame. We owe you an apology. It seems you were right about everything. Sloane exhaled slowly. I wasn't looking to be right, she said. I was looking to be believed. The tension cracked, replaced by something like reverence. She looked around the room. These were the same people who had whispered about her instability, her arrogance, her recklessness. Now they couldn't even meet her eyes. Her voice softened. We built this company on innovation, but somewhere along the line we forgot integrity. It's not just about who leads, it's about who we trust to hold the truth. Arthur nodded gravely. You have that trust now. For the first time in weeks, Sloane's hands stopped trembling. She looked at the flickering screens, at the mess Owen had turned into victory. He had done it quietly, without spotlight, without credit, just as he lived. When she left the room, the hallway lights felt brighter. The storm had passed, literally and otherwise. As she stepped into the elevator, she checked her phone again. One last message from Owen waited for her. Job's done. Don't thank me. Just keep flying. Okay. She smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. Because the janitor no one noticed had just saved her company. Because power without humility had finally met its match. And because somewhere out there, in the quiet of the city, the man who refused to be seen had just proven that unseen strength could still change everything. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time in her life, Sloane Davenport felt weightless. By the next morning, the storm had finally passed. The city skyline stood sharp and clear, washed clean by the rain that had hammered it through the night. Davenport Tower, once the stage for betrayal and humiliation, felt different now, quieter. Kendrick Shaw's arrest had made headlines before dawn. The footage of him being escorted out in handcuffs spread across every financial news feed. Phrases like corporate espionage, internal fraud, and data breach filled the airwaves. But behind every breaking alert was one sentence that carried more weight than any scandal could erase. CEO Sloane Davenport cleared of all allegations. For the first time in months, her name wasn't tied to damage control, it was tied to integrity. Yet as the headlines flashed, Sloane felt no thrill. The victory was real, but it wasn't loud. It lived quietly in her chest, steady but subdued. She stood in her office, the same corner room where her father once ruled like a monarch, but the desk felt less like a throne now and more like a place to start over. Her reflection in the window didn't look victorious. It looked human. Arthur Lynn entered without ceremony, a folder in hand. The board's reinstated you unanimously, he said. They're calling it a leadership under fire story. They want a press conference this afternoon. Sloane smiled faintly. Of course they do. They love a redemption arc. Arthur hesitated before adding, we also recovered your pilot's resignation file. You might want to know he didn't cash his last paycheck. Her smile faded. Owen? Arthur nodded. He left quietly. No contact info. Just a short note. He handed her a small folded page. Sloane opened it. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. You didn't need saving. You just needed to remember who you were. Keep your word. Keep your sky. OKG. She traced the letters with her thumb. No title, no goodbye, no request for recognition. Just truth, simple and clean. Arthur spoke softly. The man had a strange calm about him. I guess we all underestimated him. Sloane folded the note carefully and slipped it into her pocket. He wasn't calm, Arthur. He was brave enough to be still. Arthur nodded once, then left her alone. The day passed in waves. Interviews, statements, apologies, cameras flashed, reporters shouted. Shareholders cheered the company's miraculous turnaround. Through it all, Sloane's voice stayed steady, but beneath the composure was a deeper shift. A quiet humility that no headline could describe. When the press conference ended, she skipped the private car and walked home for the first time in years. The city felt different at street level, imperfect, unpredictable, alive. She passed vendors, street musicians, construction workers, faces she had never really looked at before. She thought of Owen, how he'd hidden in plain sight, how many like him must still exist in the company she ran. People invisible to those who only look upward. That night, sitting alone in her apartment, she drafted a memo, not a press release, not a corporate spin, just a simple internal message addressed to all departments. Subject: New Initiative, Project Horizon. We've spent years searching for innovation outside these walls. It's time to look within. Effective immediately, Davenport Industries will launch a mentorship and discovery program designed to identify hidden talent within our own ranks. Skill, wisdom, and courage don't always wear titles. Sometimes they wear name tags. Sometimes they sweep floors. Sometimes they're invisible until the moment they're needed most. Let's make sure they're never invisible again. She hit send without hesitation. Then she leaned back, exhaling slowly. The office, the company, even her identity, they all felt lighter now. Not perfect but honest. The walls didn't echo with control anymore. They breathed with possibility. In the quiet that followed, Sloane walked to her window. The city lights flickered like constellations, and somewhere among them she imagined a small apartment, where a father was tucking his daughter into bed, safe, unseen, free. She whispered into the glass, "Thank you, Owen." No one heard it but the night. For the first time in her life, she didn't need to be seen to feel whole. The storm had taken everything she thought made her strong and left behind everything that actually did. 6 months later, spring returned to the city. The sky was clear again, washed of the heavy gray that had once matched Sloane Davenport's life. Davenport Industries was thriving, but not because of new contracts or investor praise. The change ran deeper, through the people. Project Horizon had become the heartbeat of the company. Custodians now trained in coding, receptionists shadowed engineers, interns mentored executives on empathy and innovation. Every floor carried stories that used to be invisible. Sloane no longer ruled from the top floor. She walked the halls, spoke to people by name, listened. But one name she hadn't heard since that night still echoed quietly in her mind: Owen Grant. The world had moved on from headlines and heroics, yet she couldn't. His note stayed in her desk drawer, folded and worn. She had built an entire initiative around its message. You didn't need saving, you just needed to remember who you were. That afternoon, she attended one of Horizon's field sessions at a community training hangar on the city's outskirts. It was a partnership with a local veterans foundation, offering retraining programs for ex-pilots, mechanics and logistics workers. When she arrived, laughter and engine hums filled the air. A group of trainees crowded around an instructor explaining rotor dynamics on an old rescue helicopter. Sloane stopped mid-step. The voice was unmistakable. "Owen," she whispered. He stood by the aircraft, sleeves rolled up, oil stains on his hands. He was showing a young veteran how to check a hydraulic line. His tone was calm, patient, the same quiet authority that had once guided her through a storm. For a moment she didn't move, watching him there, at peace, surrounded by people who actually saw him. She realized this was what he'd wanted all along. Not recognition, not return, just purpose. When the session ended, she finally approached. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. Surprise flickered in his eyes, then softened into a smile. "Didn't expect to see you here, Miss Davenport." "It's Sloane," she corrected. "You've earned first name rights." He chuckled. "You never liked giving those away. People change." "I noticed," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Heard about Project Horizon. Looks like you found your sky again." She smiled faintly. "You gave me the compass." He shrugged. "You did the flying." There was a long pause between them, comfortable, like the quiet after rain. She held out an envelope. "I came to offer you something." He raised an eyebrow. "Another helicopter ride?" "Close," she said, smiling. "I want you to lead the new division for internal training, Horizon Air. You'll have full independence, your own team, complete authority." He hesitated, glancing at the envelope but not taking it. "You really think I'm the right person for that?" "I don't think," Sloane replied. "I know you taught me that leadership isn't about being seen, it's about seeing." For a moment he said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll consider it, but only if it doesn't involve suits or boardroom." "No suits," she promised. "Just good people and clean work." As he finally took the envelope, she grinned. "You remember our little bet? The one where you said you'd marry whoever could fly your helicopter?" "Technically I said fly this helicopter and I'll marry you." He laughed, shaking his head. "You don't still plan to honor that, do you?" She tilted her head, teasing. "Relax, Captain. I've already learned not all flights are meant for the sky." They both laughed then, an easy, genuine laugh that carried across the hangar like sunlight. When he walked away to finish his shift, she watched him go, feeling no need to stop him this time. His place wasn't beside her. It was everywhere he could lift others quietly. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Sloane recorded a short internal message for the company. It would later become part of Davenport's new training series. Her final reflection: "If this story reached you, remember this. Not every hero wears a title. Some sweep hallways, some fix engines, some hold the world together quietly so others can fly. Everyone carries hidden brilliance, you just have to look past the uniform to see it." She paused, then added softly, almost to herself, "And when you find someone who shows you humility, don't forget to thank them. They might have been carrying your wings all along." If this story moved you, tell us where you're watching from, and in one word describe how it made you feel. Let's fill the comments with gratitude for the quiet heroes who remind us what strength really means.